Some people think respect comes from a badge. They forget that true honor is earned long before anyone ever puts on a uniform. The tow truck's hydraulic arm groaned as it locked beneath the old navy blue pickup, its weathered paint shimmering beneath the bright Virginia sun. A crowd had already formed along the edge of the marina parking lot in Norfolk, phones raised, whispers drifting through the salty morning breeze. Some watched out of curiosity. Others watched because they assumed they already knew the story. A white police officer folded his arms with quiet confidence, convinced he was restoring order to what he believed was another simple violation. Officer Ethan Brooks had written hundreds of citations over the years, and today felt no different. He barely glanced at the man standing several yards away beside the truck. To him, Marcus Reed looked like someone who had overstayed his welcome, another stranger trying to argue his way out of consequences. Marcus, however, never raised his voice. At 32 years old, the black sailor stood with remarkable composure, wearing faded jeans, polished brown work boots, and a simple gray navy sweatshirt that had begun to lose its color after countless washes. Years of military discipline had taught him that panic rarely solved anything. His calm expression only seemed to irritate Officer Brooks even more. "You had your chance," Brooks said firmly. "This vehicle is being removed." Marcus slowly looked toward his pickup. It wasn't flashy. The truck carried scratches earned through years of honest work, a fishing rod secured neatly in the bed, and a small American flag folded carefully behind the driver's seat. It looked like the kind of truck thousands of hard-working Americans drove every day. Nothing about it hinted that its owner had spent over a decade serving his country across oceans most people would never see. A woman near the sidewalk quietly asked, "Is he really getting his truck towed?" Another man shrugged. "Guess he parked where he shouldn't have." Assumptions spread faster than facts. Marcus reached into his pocket with slow, deliberate movements, making sure every action remained visible. "Officer." Brooks immediately stiffened. "Easy," he warned. Marcus nodded respectfully before pulling out nothing more threatening than his phone. He unlocked the screen, opened a secure messaging application, typed 8 short characters, and pressed send. No explanation, no complaint, no dramatic speech. Just one encrypted confirmation code disappearing into a silent network somewhere far beyond the crowded marina. Brooks noticed and smirked. Calling somebody isn't going to stop this. Marcus looked at him with steady eyes. "No, sir," he answered quietly. "It probably won't." The tow operator continued tightening the chains around the truck's wheels while several spectators stepped closer, eager to capture the final moment. Somewhere overhead, a seagull circled against the clear blue sky before disappearing toward the harbor. For a heartbeat, everything seemed perfectly ordinary. Then, from somewhere beyond the waterfront, a distant sound rolled across the morning air. It wasn't loud at first, just a low, synchronized rumble almost mistaken for heavy traffic. Marcus recognized it immediately, but never turned his head. Officer Brooks frowned slightly as the vibration grew stronger beneath his boots. Conversations stopped one by one. "Cameraphone is slowly lowered." The tow truck operator paused instinctively, his eyes shifting toward the entrance of the marina. Around the corner, long before anyone could see the vehicles themselves, came the unmistakable rhythm of multiple military engines moving together with disciplined precision. And in that single suspended moment, before anyone understood what was approaching, the certainty on Officer Brooks' face quietly began to disappear. The sound grew clearer with every passing second, not chaotic, not hurried, but measured with the unmistakable precision that only years of military discipline could produce. Heads slowly turned toward the marina entrance as sunlight reflected off a line of dark Navy vehicles approaching in perfect formation. There were no flashing emergency lights, no blaring sirens demanding attention, only quiet authority carried on polished steel and synchronized movement. The first vehicle rolled through the entrance, followed by another, and then another, each maintaining the exact same distance as if every foot had been carefully calculated long before that morning. The conversations that had filled the parking lot only moments earlier faded into complete silence. Even the seagulls circling above seemed to drift farther toward the harbor, leaving an unusual stillness behind. Officer Ethan Brooks instinctively straightened his posture, uncertain why his confidence suddenly felt heavier than before. The tow truck operator released his grip on the control lever without realizing he had done so, his attention now fixed entirely on the approaching convoy. Marcus Reed remained exactly where he had been standing. His breathing stayed steady. His shoulders never stiffened. His expression revealed nothing beyond quiet patience. To everyone watching, he appeared almost detached from the extraordinary scene unfolding before him. Yet inside, Marcus recognized every detail. The lead vehicle carried markings familiar only to those who had spent years working alongside Navy logistics and command personnel. The second vehicle displayed a small flag mounted near the front bumper, moving gently in the Chesapeake breeze. The third carried communications equipment rarely seen outside official operations. None of those details meant anything to the growing crowd, but they meant everything to Marcus. A teenager standing near the sidewalk whispered to his father, "Dad, why are there so many Navy vehicles?" His father frowned and quietly answered, "I honestly do not know." Officer Brooks finally stepped toward Marcus again, forcing a smile that sounded less certain than before. "Did you know they were coming?" Marcus looked toward the convoy for the first time since sending his message. "I knew someone would receive my report," he answered calmly. "I did not know who would respond." The answer only deepened the confusion. "Report? What report?" Several spectators exchanged uncertain glances. A woman lowered her phone, suddenly realizing this situation might not be what she had first assumed. For several long seconds, nobody moved. Then every vehicle stopped at precisely the same moment. Engine noise faded together until the marina became almost perfectly quiet once again. Doors remained closed. Nobody rushed outside. Nobody shouted orders. The discipline itself seemed to command more attention than words ever could. Officer Brooks reached for the radio, clipped to his shoulder, and quietly requested additional information from dispatch. Static answered first. Then an unfamiliar voice instructed him to remain at his current location until senior officials arrived. His eyebrows tightened. That response made no sense. Dispatch never spoke like that. Marcus glanced briefly toward his old pickup, still suspended above the pavement. He had driven that truck across countless miles after returning from deployments, through quiet neighborhoods, across coastal highways, and home to family dinners he once feared he might never see again. It was never about the truck itself. It represented years of service, sacrifice, and ordinary moments earned through extraordinary commitment. A warm breeze carried the scent of salt water across the parking lot as the first door of the lead vehicle finally opened. Every sailor stepping out wore an immaculate uniform. Their movements were synchronized without appearing rehearsed, each one carrying themselves with the calm confidence of people who understood exactly why they had been called. No one looked toward the crowd first. Every pair of eyes turned instead toward Marcus Reed. The sailors moved with quiet precision, their polished shoes striking the pavement in perfect rhythm until they stopped several feet from Marcus Reed. Without hesitation, the senior enlisted sailor stepped forward, raised his hand in a crisp salute, and spoke with calm professionalism. "Petty Officer Reed, thank you for your patience, sir." The words seemed to freeze the air. Nobody in the crowd had expected a greeting like that. Officer Ethan Brooks blinked twice, trying to understand what he had just heard. The man he had assumed was simply another frustrated truck owner was being addressed with unmistakable military respect. Marcus returned the salute with practiced confidence before lowering his hand. "Thank you for responding so quickly," replied. "I appreciate your professionalism." Behind the first sailor, more uniformed personnel exited the remaining vehicles. None of them looked confused. None of them appeared surprised. They behaved as though every step had already been planned long before they arrived at the marina. The officer in charge, a distinguished Navy captain named William Harper, walked forward carrying a slim leather portfolio. His uniform was immaculate, decorated with years of honorable service, Yet there was nothing theatrical about his presence. He projected the quiet confidence of someone who never needed to remind others of his authority. Captain Harper extended his hand toward Marcus with genuine warmth. Petty Officer Reed, headquarters received your priority notification less than 4 minutes ago. We came immediately after confirming the location. Marcus shook his hand respectfully. Thank you, Captain. The exchange lasted only a few seconds, but it completely changed the atmosphere. The people who had been whispering earlier now stood in complete silence. Phones remained pointed toward the scene, but nobody seemed interested in recording embarrassment anymore. Instead, they were witnessing something entirely different. Officer Brooks finally stepped forward. Captain, I am Officer Ethan Brooks with the Norfolk Police Department. I was handling a parking enforcement matter. Captain Harper nodded politely before opening the leather portfolio. Thank you, officer. We appreciate local law enforcement and the work you perform every day. His calm tone carried no hostility. However, before any further action is taken, we need to verify several details concerning this vehicle. Brooks looked toward the suspended pickup. It appeared to be parked in violation. Captain Harper turned one page inside the folder. Appearances are important, officer. Facts are even more important. The sentence was delivered without anger, yet it carried enough weight that no one interrupted him. He continued reading carefully. Vehicle identification number confirmed. Federal authorization confirmed. Temporary operational designation confirmed. He closed the folder and looked directly at the tow operator. Sir, would you please lower the vehicle safely? There appears to have been a misunderstanding that we can resolve professionally. The tow operator nodded almost immediately. Yes, sir. The hydraulic arm slowly descended, returning the pickup gently to the pavement. Marcus watched quietly, saying nothing. A young reporter who had arrived only moments earlier whispered to her cameraman, "Who exactly is this sailor?" The cameraman quietly answered, "I do not think that is the real question anymore." Captain Harper smiled slightly as he turned back toward Marcus. Your transportation assignment remains on schedule. We apologize for the unexpected delay. Marcus gave a modest nod. These things happen. I simply wanted the proper office to know what was taking place. Those words lingered over the marina. He had not demanded special treatment. He had not argued. He had not tried to intimidate anyone. He had simply trusted the system to work through the proper channels. Standing nearby, Officer Brooks suddenly realized that the calm man in front of him had never once tried to prove his importance. He had only demonstrated patience, confidence, and respect. And somehow, those quiet qualities had spoken louder than every assumption made that morning. Captain William Harper slowly closed the leather portfolio and looked around the marina, taking in the dozens of silent faces now watching every movement. The breeze carried the scent of salt water through the parking lot, rustling the small American flag mounted inside Marcus Reed's truck. For several long moments, nobody spoke. It was the kind of silence that appears only when assumptions begin to collapse under the weight of undeniable facts. Officer Ethan Brooks cleared his throat and adjusted the radio on his shoulder, searching for the confidence that had come so easily only minutes earlier. Captain, he said carefully, if there's been a misunderstanding, I would appreciate knowing exactly what I missed. Harper regarded him with calm professionalism. That is a reasonable question, officer. He stepped beside the pickup and rested one hand lightly against the driver's door. This vehicle has been participating in an authorized transportation support assignment connected to an ongoing Navy readiness program. It is intentionally registered in a manner that does not attract unnecessary attention. The purpose is practical, not ceremonial. Brooks looked at the weather truck again, almost unable to reconcile the ordinary appearance with what he had just heard. This truck, he asked quietly. Harper nodded. Yes. Not every mission requires expensive equipment or polished displays. Sometimes the most dependable tools are the ones people overlook. Marcus remained silent, allowing Captain Harper to answer every question without interruption. Years of service had taught him that credibility often grew stronger when accompanied by patience. A young boy standing near the front of the crowd tugged gently on his mother's sleeve. "Mom," he whispered, "why does everybody keep thanking him?" His mother smiled softly without taking her eyes off Marcus. "Because respect usually follows people who earn it, not people who demand it." The words lingered in the air. Several bystanders lowered their phones completely, no longer interested in capturing an embarrassing confrontation. Instead, they found themselves witnessing something far more meaningful. Captain Harper turned toward Marcus once again. "Petty Officer Reed, your commanding officer also requested that I personally verify your travel schedule. Your mother is still expecting you this afternoon, correct?" Marcus smiled for the first time that morning. It was not a triumphant smile, only one filled with quiet gratitude. "Yes, sir. She has a physical therapy appointment at 1 o'clock. I promised I would drive her home afterward." Harper returned the smile. "Then let's make sure you keep that promise." Hearing those words shifted the entire perspective of the situation. The man many had silently judged only minutes earlier was not rushing to an important ceremony or a prestigious event. He was simply trying to keep his word to his mother. Officer Brooks looked down briefly before meeting Marcus's eyes. "I did not know any of that," he admitted. Marcus answered with the same calm tone he had maintained since the beginning. "No, sir. You cannot have known. That is why I tried to explain before the tow process started." Brooks nodded slowly, replaying the earlier conversation in his mind. He remembered how quickly he had reached a conclusion before allowing the explanation to finish. Around them, the morning continued as boats drifted gently in the harbor and gulls called overhead, but the atmosphere in the parking lot had changed completely. Captain Harper looked toward the assembled sailors. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "our responsibility is complete. We came here to verify facts, support one of our own, and ensure that cooperation between agencies remains grounded in professionalism." Every sailor acknowledged the instruction with quiet discipline. Marcus glanced once more at his old pickup, then toward the people gathered around it. He hoped that when they remembered this morning, they would remember something larger than a truck in a parking lot. He hoped they would remember how quickly appearances can mislead and how much stronger simple truth becomes when people are willing to wait long enough to hear it. Officer Ethan Brooks stood quietly beside the returned pickup, watching as the small group of sailors completed their final checks with remarkable efficiency. There was no celebration, no dramatic display of authority, and no attempt to embarrass anyone. Every movement reflected the same discipline that had carried them through years of service. That restraint left a stronger impression than any speech ever could. Captain William Harper glanced at his watch before speaking again. "Petty Officer Reed, before you depart, Headquarters requested that I provide a brief update regarding your assignment." Marcus nodded respectfully. "Yes, sir." Harper opened the leather portfolio once more and removed a single document protected inside a transparent folder. He did not hand it to Marcus immediately. Instead, he looked toward Officer Brooks with a calm expression. "Officer, there is one detail that may help explain why this response occurred so quickly." Brooks listened without interruption. Harper continued. "The notification Mr. Reed transmitted this morning was not a request for special treatment. It was an operational accountability report. Whenever personnel assigned to designated transportation support experience an unexpected delay, Headquarters requires immediate notification so logistics schedules remain accurate. The system does not evaluate blame. It simply ensures that everyone, depending on those schedules, receives reliable information." Brooks slowly nodded as the explanation settled in. The message Marcus had sent had never been intended to summon power. It had simply fulfilled another responsibility. A reporter standing nearby lowered her notebook for a moment. "So the convoy was never sent to intimidate anyone?" she asked carefully. Harper answered without hesitation. "Absolutely not. We responded because one of our sailors reported that his authorized assignment had been interrupted. Our responsibility is to verify facts, assist our personnel, and coordinate professionally with our community partners." Those words changed the story once again. The convoy had not arrived because Marcus carried hidden influence or personal connections. It had arrived because an entire system had quietly done exactly what it had been designed to do. Marcus accepted the document from Captain Harper and carefully placed it inside his truck before turning back toward the group. "Thank you for making the trip," he said sincerely. "I know everyone has responsibilities waiting." One of the younger sailors smiled. "You would have done the same for any of us." Marcus nodded. "Yes, I would have." The simple exchange carried more weight than anyone expected. Several people in the crowd exchanged thoughtful looks as they realized they were witnessing something built on mutual trust instead of personal privilege. Officer Brooks looked across the marina toward the calm water before speaking again. "Petty Officer Reed, I owe you something." Marcus met his eyes with the same steady expression he had maintained all morning. Brooks continued, "When you tried to explain earlier, I decided I already understood the situation before I had actually listened. That was my mistake." Marcus remained silent for a brief moment, allowing the honesty of the apology to stand on its own. Finally, he answered, "Listening is something all of us keep learning, sir. Every day gives us another opportunity." The response surprised everyone nearby. There was no bitterness, no lecture, and no desire to prolong the uncomfortable moment. Instead, Marcus offered something much more difficult: grace. Captain Harper quietly smiled. In more than 3 decades of military service, he had learned that real character often appeared during ordinary moments when no medals were being awarded and no cameras were expected to be watching. Looking around the marina, he realized everyone present had received an unexpected lesson that morning. Sometimes the greatest demonstration of strength was not proving someone wrong. Sometimes it was giving them the chance to become better after discovering the truth. The convoy remained parked only a few more minutes before Captain William Harper received a quiet update through his earpiece. He listened carefully, acknowledged the message with a simple nod, and then turned toward Marcus Reed. "Your route has been cleared. Headquarters confirmed there are no additional delays." Marcus thanked him once again before placing the authorization folder securely behind the driver's seat of his pickup. The old truck started with the familiar rumble it had carried for years, a sound that reminded Marcus of countless early mornings leaving the naval base before sunrise and countless evenings returning home after long weeks away from family. There was nothing luxurious about the vehicle, yet every mile reflected commitment rather than appearance. Before climbing into his own vehicle, Captain Harper approached Officer Ethan Brooks one final time. "Officer, cooperation between military and civilian agencies depends on communication. We all make decisions with limited information from time to time. What matters is what we do after we discover more." Brooks nodded sincerely. "I understand, Captain. I will remember today for a long time." Harper extended his hand, and Brooks accepted it without hesitation. It was not the handshake of two people pretending nothing had happened. It was the handshake of professionals choosing to move forward with greater understanding. Around them, several members of the crowd quietly dispersed. The excitement that had first drawn them to the parking lot had transformed into thoughtful conversation. An older veteran wearing a faded ball cap paused beside Marcus's truck before speaking. "Son," he said with a warm smile, I served 30 years ago. Watching how you handled yourself today reminded me what the uniform is really supposed to represent." Marcus smiled gratefully. "Thank you, sir. That means more than you know." The veteran tipped his cap before walking away toward the waterfront. Nearby, the young reporter closed her notebook but hesitated before leaving. She approached Marcus respectfully. "May I ask one question?" Marcus nodded. "Of course." She looked briefly at the truck and then back at him. "When everyone was assuming the worst about you earlier, were you ever tempted to argue louder?" Marcus considered the question for several seconds before answering. "No, I have learned that raising my voice rarely changes someone's mind. Giving the truth enough time usually does." The reporter wrote down every word exactly as he spoke it. She realized those few sentences explained the entire morning better than any dramatic headline ever could. Captain Harper returned to the lead vehicle and signaled quietly to the convoy commander. One by one, the Navy vehicles started their engines again. Their departure looked almost identical to their arrival, disciplined, orderly, and without unnecessary attention. They had never come to create a spectacle. They had simply completed their responsibility. As Marcus slowly pulled his pickup toward the marina exit, Officer Brooks stepped forward one last time. Marcus rolled down the window. Brooks removed his sunglasses and spoke with complete sincerity. "I hope your mother has a good appointment this afternoon." Marcus's expression softened. "Thank you. She will be happy to know I am still on time." Brooks smiled for the first time that morning. "Drive safely, Petty Officer Reed." Marcus nodded respectfully before easing onto the road. The convoy followed at a comfortable distance for several blocks before turning toward the naval installation, leaving Marcus to continue toward the rehabilitation clinic alone. Watching the vehicles disappear beneath the bright Virginia sky, Officer Brooks stood quietly beside the now empty parking space where the old pickup had been only an hour earlier. The painted lines on the pavement looked exactly the same as before, yet somehow everything about that place felt different. Nothing physical had changed, only perspective had. And sometimes perspective is the beginning of real change. By the time Marcus Reed pulled into the rehabilitation center parking lot, the afternoon sun had climbed higher over Norfolk, casting long reflections across the rows of parked cars. The events at the marina already felt strangely distant, as though they belonged to another day instead of only an hour earlier. He stepped out of his pickup, carrying a small bouquet of white lilies he had purchased before everything had been interrupted. Their delicate petals remained untouched, carefully protected on the passenger seat throughout the unexpected delay. Inside the clinic, the familiar scent of fresh coffee and disinfectant filled the quiet lobby. Nurses greeted patients by name, families waited patiently beside large windows, and soft piano music drifted through the hallway speakers. It was an ordinary place, filled with ordinary people doing their best to care for one another. Marcus preferred places like this. They reminded him that most of life was built not on dramatic moments, but on simple acts of kindness repeated every day. A receptionist looked up and smiled warmly. "Good afternoon, Mr. Reed. Miss Evelyn has been asking whether you made it." Marcus smiled back. "I told her I would not miss today." A few moments later, Evelyn Reed appeared slowly from the therapy room using a lightweight walker. Her silver hair framed a gentle smile that seemed capable of calming any storm. The moment she saw her son waiting with the flowers, her eyes brightened. "There you are," she said softly. "I knew you would come." Marcus handed her the bouquet before carefully taking the walker so she could adjust her sweater. "I promised," he replied, "and your promises have always meant something." She looked at him closely, noticing the thoughtful expression that remained on his face. "Something happened this morning, did it not?" Marcus hesitated for a brief moment before nodding. There was a misunderstanding at the marina. Everything was resolved. Evelyn studied him with the quiet wisdom only a mother seems to possess. "Resolved because you stayed calm?" Marcus laughed quietly. "I suppose so." She gently touched his arm. "Your father used to say that character is tested long before anyone notices it." Those words lingered in Marcus's mind as they slowly walked toward the parking lot together. Unknown to either of them, the story from the marina had already begun spreading through the city. Several witnesses had uploaded videos online, but unlike many recordings that captured arguments and outrage, these clips showed something unusual. Viewers watched a man remain respectful under pressure, a military convoy arrive without drama, and a misunderstanding end with professionalism rather than conflict. Local news stations soon requested copies of the footage. Community organizations began discussing it during afternoon meetings. Veterans shared it with former service members across the country. Even people who disagreed about many issues found themselves agreeing on one point. Patience had changed the outcome. Back at the marina, Officer Ethan Brooks remained in conversation with his precinct supervisor, Lieutenant Sarah Collins, who had reviewed the initial incident report. She listened carefully before asking one simple question. "When Mr. Reed first tried to explain, did you allow him to finish?" Brooks lowered his eyes for a moment. "No, Lieutenant. I believed I already understood the situation." Collins nodded thoughtfully rather than critically. "Then perhaps today gave all of us an important reminder. Experience helps us make decisions. Assumptions can make us miss the truth." Brooks quietly accepted the lesson. As Marcus helped his mother into the passenger seat of the old pickup, she admired the familiar truck that had carried their family through birthdays, graduations, deployments, and homecomings. To everyone else, it looked like an aging vehicle with faded paint. To her, it represented years of sacrifice, loyalty, and a son who had never forgotten where he came from. Marcus closed her door gently, climbed behind the wheel, and started the engine once again. The truck rolled away from the clinic exactly as it had left the marina, ordinary in appearance, extraordinary only because of the man driving it. The following morning, the story had traveled far beyond the Norfolk waterfront. Local newspapers did not describe a confrontation. They described professionalism. Television anchors did not focus on raised voices or dramatic accusations. Instead, they replayed the quiet moments that had surprised everyone watching. The clip that spread across thousands of phones showed Marcus Reed standing calmly beside his old pickup while a Navy convoy arrived without urgency, without spectacle, and without a single unnecessary word. The comments beneath the video reflected something unusual. Veterans thanked Marcus for representing the values they remembered from their own years of service. Police officers from neighboring departments wrote that patience and communication should always come before conclusions. Parents shared the story with their children, saying it demonstrated why character mattered more than appearances. At the Norfolk Police Department, Lieutenant Sarah Collins gathered several officers for their regular briefing. Instead of beginning with crime reports or scheduling updates, she displayed a still image from the marina surveillance footage. The room remained quiet as everyone recognized the scene. Collins looked around before speaking. This is not a meeting about assigning blame. It is a meeting about improving judgment. She allowed the words to settle before continuing. Every badge carries authority. Every citizen deserves to be heard before that authority reaches a conclusion. Officer Ethan Brooks listened carefully from the second row. He no longer viewed the incident as an embarrassing mistake he hoped people would forget. He viewed it as a lesson he intended to remember. After the meeting ended, Brooks approached Lieutenant Collins privately. "I would like to request additional community engagement training," he said. Collins nodded with quiet approval. "That is a good place to begin." Across town, Marcus spent the afternoon helping his mother organize old family photographs in her living room. Picture after picture told the story of an ordinary American family. Birthday parties, church picnics, high school graduations, Navy boot camp, homecomings after deployment. Evelyn Reed smiled as she held one photograph showing Marcus at 18 years old wearing his first Navy uniform. "You were so nervous that day," she laughed softly. Marcus smiled. "I remember thinking I had no idea what I was doing." Evelyn carefully returned the photograph to the album. "You learned." Marcus nodded. "Because people took the time to teach me." A gentle knock sounded at the front door. Marcus opened it to find the young reporter from the marina standing on the porch with a small camera crew waiting respectfully behind her. "Mr. Reed," she said, "our station would like to interview you. Many people have been inspired by your response yesterday." Marcus considered the invitation before answering politely. "I appreciate that, but I do not believe the story is really about me." The reporter looked surprised. "Then who is it about?" Marcus glanced toward his mother before answering. "It is about remembering that every person deserves to be treated with dignity before we decide who they are. If people remember that lesson, then yesterday was worth something." The reporter slowly lowered her microphone. She realized that no carefully prepared question could improve upon that answer. As she thanked Marcus and walked back toward the sidewalk, she understood why the story had touched so many people. It was never about an old truck, a convoy, or even a misunderstanding. It was about the quiet strength of someone who chose patience when impatience would have been easier, and respect when respect had not first been offered. Several weeks passed, and the marina returned to its familiar rhythm. Fishing boats departed before sunrise. Families wandered along the waterfront on quiet afternoons, and the parking spaces filled and emptied without anyone giving them a second thought. Yet for the people who had witnessed that extraordinary morning, the place no longer felt ordinary. It had become a reminder that a single moment of patience could leave an impression that lasted far longer than a single mistake. Officer Ethan Brooks continued serving his community, but those who worked beside him noticed small changes. He asked more questions before reaching conclusions. He listened longer before speaking. During community meetings, he often encouraged younger officers to remember that every encounter began with a person, not an assumption. Lieutenant Sarah Collins quietly observed the difference without ever mentioning the marina again. She did not need to. The lesson had already taken root. Across town, Marcus Reed returned to the steady rhythm of military life. Some mornings began before daylight. Others ended long after sunset. Training continued. Responsibilities continued. Service continued. He never mentioned the convoy unless someone asked directly. And even then, he always redirected the conversation toward the teamwork that had made everything possible. To Marcus, the real story had never been about one sailor receiving support. It had been about an entire system proving that professionalism could still prevail when people honored their responsibilities. One Saturday afternoon, Marcus and his mother returned to the waterfront for a small community veterans gathering. The same old pickup rolled into the parking lot, carrying nothing more remarkable than 2 folding chairs and a homemade peach pie Evelyn insisted on bringing. Several people recognized Marcus immediately, but instead of surrounding him with cameras or questions, they greeted him with warm smiles and simple handshakes. Children waved. Veterans thanked him quietly. A few police officers from neighboring precincts introduced themselves with genuine respect. No one celebrated him as a hero. They welcomed him as a neighbor. Officer Brooks happened to be assigned to the event that afternoon. When he noticed Marcus arriving, he walked over with an easy smile. "Good to see you again, Petty Officer Reed." Marcus extended his hand. "Likewise, Officer Brooks." Brooks glanced at the familiar pickup and laughed softly. "I suppose I will never look at that truck the same way again." Marcus smiled. "I hope you look at the next driver differently, too." Brooks nodded without hesitation. "I already do." The two men shook hands once more, not because the past had been erased, but because mutual respect had replaced misunderstanding. Nearby, Evelyn watched the exchange with quiet satisfaction. She knew that forgiveness did not erase difficult moments. It transformed what came after them. As the afternoon sun settled over the Chesapeake Bay, families gathered beneath American flags, gently moving in the coastal breeze. Veterans shared stories with children who listened with wide eyes. Police officers laughed alongside sailors, firefighters, teachers, and neighbors. There were no headlines left to write and no cameras searching for another dramatic ending. There was only a community moving forward together. Marcus looked across the water before helping his mother into the truck. He had never asked to be treated as more important than anyone else. He had only hoped to be treated fairly. Sometimes justice does not arrive with loud words or dramatic victories. Sometimes it arrives quietly through people willing to listen, willing to learn, and willing to change. A badge may represent authority. A uniform may represent service. But character is what gives both of them their true meaning. Because in the end, respect is never earned by power alone. It is earned by the choices people make when nobody knows who they are, and by the grace they show after everyone finally does.